AFC South, let's go Houston Texans here.
Houston Texans, I think, need defensive tackle help. I don't really love Sheldon Rankins, Tim Settle. I think they could definitely use an upgrade there. They still need offensive line help, though. So Mina poo-pooed this as an idea. I think that offensive line could be put together very quickly. I don't think it should have been anywhere near as bad as it was a year ago. And when you start looking at the personnel, I don't know how much of the problem was personnel, even with trading away Laramie Tunsil and theoretically taking the one good offensive lineman you had last year, getting rid of him. I think that if this offense in our world of creep back toward average, if I told you that right now, even without adding like a first round offensive lineman, that this Houston Texans offensive line ranked 17th next year, would it shock you?
The offensive line being Cam Robinson's in to play left tackle. We don't know exactly what Titus Howard's going to do. He could play guard. He could play right tackle. Trent Brown is on the roster. I loved the signing last year for the Bengals, but he got hurt. But he would have been a creep back toward average type of right tackle stopgap. And then Jared Patterson, Juice Scruggs, Ed Ingram, Laken Tomlinson. You're trying to find, two starters out of that group. Patterson plays center, and then Scruggs, Ingram, and Tomlinson maybe playing guard. Maybe Tomlinson plays left guard and Titus Howard's played right tackle. Yeah, I'm just naming names, but yes, that could potentially creep back toward average, but I think it's on the lower end of probability, I would say.
Like, obviously you don't love any of it, right? But if that group, let's say the starting five ends up being Cam Robinson, Titus Howard, Jarrett Patterson, Juice Scruggs, and Blake Fisher / Trent Brown, that's easily capable of being an average to slightly below average offensive line. Like, it's a need in that you could upgrade any of those five positions relatively easily. But I don't think we're not looking at this group like it's the Tennessee Titans offensive line from a couple of years ago, where you're like, every single starting member of this line is cheeks and they need to be replaced immediately. I don't think that's what we're dealing with here. I think so much of what went wrong should not have gone wrong.
The problem is I think all those players are on the lower end of average, except maybe Cam Robinson and Titus Howard. I think that's the problem. And the right tackle spot, still a question mark. Trent Brown getting older, coming off of injury. You can't necessarily rely on him. If we're talking need, it still has to start with offensive line for the Titans, though, in my opinion.
But the two that are not below average, I think, are fine. I mean, they're average to above average. Cam Robinson, Titus Howard, and then the other three are young, so they might not be as bad as they looked last year.
I'm still talking Texans offensive line here. I think that's a bigger need than defensive tackle. If we want to, for the 10th different team here, name the 330-pounders as options for them, because that's not really Sheldon Rankin's game. Settle's okay. They have Mario Edwards. Those are, more penetrating type of defensive tackles. I do like Houston's defensive line depth, though, but you can always add a little bit more. So add the big-bodied nose tackles there, but I really think offensive line needs to be in play. Like, if you added a Gray Zabel to that offensive line in the first round as a potential plug-and-play starter, maybe Howard kicks out to right tackle, then we're starting to get back toward a better spot there. And not even for the immediate future, it's also the long-term play. There's not a lot of offense. Cam Robinson's only there for 1 year. There's not a long-term play there for Houston. So I think Josh Conerly from Oregon could be in the mix there, compete at right tackle, kick out to left tackle next year maybe as Cam Robinson moves on. I think there's still a double up on the offensive line candidate here, given their needs.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think you could upgrade on any of the five. I just think people are going to treat that offensive line like it's, the worst unit in football. And I think that could very quickly end up being a reasonable offensive line.
The strongest point you made is, to me, I think less about the personnel thing and more about Bobby's out, offensive line coach is out. They just looked awful, picking up stunts, twists, blitz, any sort of extra pressure, sim pressures. They were just awful at all of that last year. That might just improve, personnel aside, even though I think the personnel could get better for Houston.
I think you could argue they need wide receiver as well. I mean, Nico Collins obviously is amazing as wide receiver one. Outside of that, Christian, we gave him Jack Besh, right, in our 2-round mock draft. Like, I argued that Jack Besh would be the second best wide receiver on this team. You argued that there's no way he's better than Christian Kirk. Either way, I think that wide receiver 2/3 is a theoretical need given the Tank Dell's injury and injury history at this point. has to put him into the, like, it's a bonus if he comes back and is an impactful playmaker. But I think they basically have to be working under the assumption right now that there's a gap at wide receiver 2/3.
Yeah, I mean, I'd still love to see more receiver depth there for sure for the Texans. All right, let's go Indianapolis Colts. Biggest needs for the Colts heading into the draft.
So obviously you've got the quarterback thing, the way that the competition, Anthony Richardson versus Daniel Jones, it's a need in that if Jones wins that competition, they need a quarterback. If Richardson wins it, maybe they don't, but they might still anyway. Either way, it's not a this year thing, right? They can't go and draft another guy and throw him in there and like, oh, look at now, it's a three-way competition. No, it's like, we'll give this a shot to work out. If it doesn't work out, then we're definitely in the quarterback market next year. Outside of that, though, I thought this is actually not a bad roster. Tight end is by far, like, that's the one glaring need. Outside of tight end, though, it's really depth. And, maybe they need another starting cornerback, but this is actually a pretty good roster.
I would add linebacker to the mix next to Zaire Franklin. That's the only other place I would really look as far as acute needs. I think they might be a sneaky option for Jahad Campbell in the first round, if you consider linebacker for the Colts in the new scheme with Lou Anarumo coming in, where he's had pretty active 3-down type of linebackers in Cincinnati, and Campbell could fit there. But you're right, like tight end is where everybody's given them. If Tyler Warren is still there, or if Warren goes in the top 10, hey, just give them Colston Loveland, because it is the most glaring. We don't have somebody dependable there. I know you used to love Will Mallory a couple of years ago, but Will Mallory's not keeping you from drafting the next tight end. I will say, as down as I am on the tight end group, if you add Tyler Warren especially for the Colts with his physicality and it's just another difficult body to cover. And he's got that 3-down run game ability. If Warren is there at 14, I'd be good with that as far as, adding him for the Colts with all those other pass catchers, with what they want to do in the run game, whether it is Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones paired with Jonathan Taylor. I think that is an outstanding fit for the Colts. Loveland's a little bit, I think, less good in the run game, but it gives you a versatile pass game type of weapon to complement those guys. So I think either of those guys fit well for the Colts. Again, I just say they're sneaky in the mix for Jahad Campbell at linebacker if they're willing to go that route.
Yeah, to me, there are two like insta draft picks, like so obvious connections that you just make them. Mason Graham going to Jacksonville at 5, and then Tyler Warren going to the Colts at 14. I think if those guys are available when those teams are picking, it's just a snap, instant, turn the card in. Like Warren for this team fills the biggest need and is, I think, a really good player for them to grab.
I would say right guard potentially too. I mean, I don't know who's slated to step in there. Matt Goncalves played a little bit of tackle last year. It was more of a tackle coming out of college. They could be the Tate. They could grab Mullet, man. Tate Ratledge. Get him in there. Nice fit for Indianapolis. You're right, though. They are one of the teams when you look up and down the depth chart, other than saying, hey, these here are some expiring contracts.
Yeah.
It's in pretty good shape from a depth perspective, which feels like the 7th straight year we're saying that for the Colts, right? That's kind of what Chris Ballard has done.
And it shows you the power of quarterback. Like they have a pretty good roster, and it doesn't matter at all if somebody does not emerge as a quarterback that can win for them from that competition, right? Whether it's, Daniel Jones, the next guy, or Anthony Richardson. It's like you've consistently built a pretty good roster, and none of it matters unless you get the quarterback position right. This is the problem, that Joe Shane is dealing with at the top of the draft. Like none of it matters unless you get the quarterback. It's the Andrew Berry thing where you've been praising overall his body of work, but the thing you got wrong was the worst thing you could possibly get wrong. And now,
confirmed right, Jimmy Haslam took all the blame. It wasn't Andrew Berry.
Those are two slightly different things, right? Like confirmed, Jimmy Haslam took responsibility for it publicly. That does not necessarily mean that Jimmy Haslam was responsible for it. Who knows? But anyway, the point being, that's the power of quarterback, that it is by far the single biggest needle moving thing. And if you don't get that right, you can build a really good roster, positions 2 through 53, and it won't mean anything.
Hey guys, just taking a quick break to tell you, hey, just over 50% of you are still unsubscribed to Check the Mic. It helps the channel. It helps to make sure that you don't miss any of our shows. So if you have a chance, hit the subscribe button right now. All right, let's go. Jacksonville Jaguars, biggest need for the Jags heading into the draft.
Cornerback, I think, is a pretty big need for them. Defensive tackle, that's why we've been talking about Mason Graham being a great fit for them at the top of the draft. I think that still makes a ton of sense. They still need wide receiver help outside of Brian Thomas. Looks phenomenal, but you let Christian Kirk go. I don't know if Gabe Davis is, how much of an impact he makes in that role. I would love to see another guy added there, but cornerback and defensive tackle will be my two biggest ones.
Yeah, it feels like cornerback 2, receiver 2. I'm definitely on defensive tackle. I mean, I know Jags fans might be sick of seeing Mason Graham mocked to them at 5 overall, but I'm good with run the card in, get him on the team.
Yeah.
Get to the rest of the team building effort and get the second wave of corner. Get the Benjamin Morrises, Chavon Ravel, naming them again as round 2 options. If the Jags came away with Graham and one of those corners, round 1 or 2, I would feel awesome about that defense moving in the right direction. And then receiver 2, right? I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. looks like a star, and then it's the deep threat, less dependable Gabe Davis, De'Ami Brown types. Can you get a dependable, more of a possession type of option opposite Brian Thomas Jr.?
Yeah, and De'Ami Brown, Gabe Davis, they're sort of similar potential skill sets or roles within the offense. I would just love to see that clear number 2 added to that team. I think it's a significantly lower need than cornerback 2, defensive tackle, which I think are fairly glaring.
No, but Drake in the chat mentions Teteroa McMillan. We've talked about him with Brian Thomas Jr. a few times. Again, I know you think at 5 that might be a little rich for McMillan. Yeah. And maybe it is, especially given where the perception is for him around the league. I'm just saying, in isolation, McMillan's skill set for Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence has not had a whole bunch of, hey, just throw it up to this big-bodied receiver and trust him to make a play. Has not had much of that for his career. We always wanted him to get his old college teammate T. Higgins somehow. We tried to pair him with Allen Robinson in a return to the Jags years ago. Just hasn't had much of that. I would love to see McMillan as a compliment to Brian Thomas Jr. So maybe they could trade down and do that. I would be fine with that as an option for the Jags as well.
Yeah. To me, though, it's like, sure, if you could trade down and make that happen, I wouldn't turn down Mason Graham to make that happen, though. Like, if your options are select Mason Graham at 5 or trade down and maybe grab Ted McMillan later on, I would just turn in the card for Mason Graham.
Ooh, I'd have to see the balance sheet there. If it's Teteroa McMillan and Alfred Collins versus one Mason Graham, I think we've got a discussion there. If you're the Jags, you got to think about that. I love Mason Graham at 5 though, so awesome with that for the Jags. Let's wrap it up with the Tennessee Titans in the AFC South here. Their biggest needs, obviously, quarterback, and we're assuming Cam Ward will be that guy. But what else for Tennessee here?
Right. I'm assuming they're bringing in Cam Ward at this point. I think they need wide receiver 1 and 3. They're good at 2. Calvin Ridley, good 2.
It's good 2.
They need 1 and 3. And then like defensive depth, like edge rusher, they need cornerback. They need just defense generally.
We talked about Jalen Noel. We debated Jalen Noel would love that fit for Cam Ward with his speed. Yeah.
And Kyle Williams, his teammate. We already did it.
Kyle Williams, his teammate. So, look, they're in a tough spot, I think, because they're down a few picks. They're going to pick early in the second round and then not till late third round. And so for a team that's rebuilding and you're picking QB at 1, you're only going to have one other pick in the top 100. Would love to see them trade down and fill multiple needs, edge, all these other needs that still exist here.
What if we attack the teammate thing where there's no evidence for it? What if we do it? We could give him Kyle Williams, right, earlier in the draft, and then we could come back and get Restrepo late in the draft, and that's 1 and 3.
Elijah Arroyo to be Chigakonkwo's compliment there. Yeah, just keep throwing Hurricanes and Cougars at him.
Just everybody with familiarity with Cam Ward.
That's it. Get all of his guys. I think Jalen Noel would be an awesome fit, though. Really do. Even though they didn't play together, I think that would be an awesome fit for them. If they do want to go edge in the second round, remember they Harold Landry's out. They have Arden Key, Draymond Jones, who's more of a hybrid type of player. Lorenzo Carter, like they need edge help.
Yeah.
That's in the mix for second round. So if one of those first rounders falls, I don't know where the NFL's going to land on Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College. I honestly don't know if he could end up at pick 15 or pick 40, and I wouldn't be surprised. Actually, Harold Landry was a similar guy. Remember Landry, we kept mocking in the top half of the first round back in 2018, and whenever he was coming out, he ended up going in the second round to the Titans. If Ezeraku is there, Nick Scourton from Texas A&M, Landon Jackson from Arkansas, I could see them grabbing an edge, and I think all those guys could be in play in the second round as well.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.